Hi, I'm Rita Cook, and today we're in Liverpool. If you don't know what Liverpool is, well, that means that you just came here from another planet. Liverpool, as everyone probably knows, is the home of the Beatles. Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison. We're about to go down into the Beatles Museum, and let's see what we find down there. Here we are in the first room of the exhibit at the Beatles Museum in Liverpool. Behind me is a glass exhibit of the Quarrymen, which Rod Davis was in the band with John Lennon back in their early years. So here we are in the Beatles Museum in Liverpool, England. Right now we're in one of the rooms in the museum, and as you can see, it's the replication of a club from Hamburg, Germany, and behind me is an amazing picture of the Beatles live in performance. Remember the Eleanor Rigby song? Here's the gravestone. It says, "In loving memory, Eleanor Rigby, 12th September, 1692. We all live in a yellow submarine." Here we are, guys, in the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. Now we're about to turn the corner and go into the famous cavern where the Beatles played here in Liverpool. It was in 1964 when the Beatles first boarded a plane just about like this one. It was a Pan Am airplane, and they took their first trip to America, where they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Beatlemania was already going strong in Great Britain, and now it was coming to America. And here we are at the end of the Beatles Museum exhibition. As you know, the Beatles broke up in the 70s, and from there they all went into solo careers. Behind me is John Lennon's White Room, and one of the questions that many people had when the Beatles broke up was if they would ever reunite for a concert. Well, in 1980, the answer was no. As we all know, John Lennon was killed in New York City by a man named Mark Chapman. He killed him on December 8th, 1980, and the answer to whether the Beatles would ever reunite was a big no, and the world would never be the same, especially if you were a Beatles fan.
No, I only met Paul very briefly, because I just sort of drifted out of the band, and Paul replaced me in the band.
Did you ever look back and regret that?
Not really, no. I couldn't stand the haircuts. And it was no big deal. I mean, the band was becoming more rock and roll, which is why Pete left. And I was actually a banjo player then, and banjos didn't go too well in rock and roll. So it wasn't a problem, really. I must have been there the first day John met Paul, but I don't remember anything about it at all, which is really inconvenient. So I said to people, well, what would you like, the myth or the reality? The reality, I said, don't remember anything. And so I sometimes joke that I probably went to the bathroom at the time. You know, the greatest moment in rock and roll history, and Rod Davis's bladder lets him down, you know. I was always more interested in a folky side rather than the rock and roll. The other guys were more interested in rock and roll. And like many people in the UK, most of the skifflers became rock and rollers, but a significant other slice became folkies. So I learned to play mandolin and fiddle and guitar and became a bluegrass guitar picker. So that's what university did for me. After university, I went to Germany, a small town ending in Berg, and I played in a band, but it wasn't Hamburg, it was Regensburg in Bavaria. In Germany, obviously they liked American rock and roll, but they couldn't afford any American rock and rollers to come over, so a lot of Germans couldn't tell the difference between English and Yanks, so British rock and rollers were a fairly reasonable substitute, because and so they came over and found a lively scene in Liverpool and in London and started importing rock and rollers to Hamburg. So that's how Tony Sheridan came to be over there. He's more or less the granddaddy of them all, I think. So that's why Germany was attractive. British rock and rollers were attractive for the Germans. We were cheaper, basically. People say that the English are really bad at learning foreign languages. Well, if all the pop music was written in Azerbaijani or something like that, and your parents would be saying, "Don't listen to that goddamn Azerbaijani stuff," the one thing you would do is learn all the words and be able to speak Azerbaijani. Well, it happens to be English. I was playing in the jazz band, was rather good. We had a French guy on the bass, German cornet player, German clarinet player, an American Army captain, artillery captain, who was at the local base on drums, and I was on the banjo. So it was a very international band. 20, 30 years previously, we'd all be shooting each other. So it was really, really quite a nice way of, reconciling things, I thought.
Here we are on London's British Airways London Eye. It climbs about 35 meters above London. There's some amazing views, and supposedly they only had a license for this for about 5 years, but British Air has just tried to get a license to keep this for another 30 years. It's a very popular thing to do if you come to London. I'm here with Damon Lane on the Eye, and he's from Backroads Touring Company, and we just did a tour. Tell us about the tour that we just finished doing.
Well, it was a rock and roll tour of London.
What's the most popular place that you take people to see?
Oh, Abbey Road, easily. People want to know where the Beatles recorded their stuff, and to take a photo on the famous crossing, which is used as the cover for the Abbey Road album, is the primary objective of most of the people who go on the tour, definitely.
And as you can see right now, Damon and I are drinking, as what they call in America, the mimosas, which is champagne and orange juice. And you said it was called something else here.
Yeah, they call it a Bucks Fizz here, and I don't know why. So I don't know where the name of the drink comes from, but that's what it's called here.
Okay, and tonight we're going to be going on a Sinister tour with you. Just tell me real quickly what that's going to be about.
Yeah, Sinister London. It's a tour around central London, but away from the big tourist sites and hopefully the tourists. And we deal with people like Jack the Ripper and sites of public execution and a few decent ghost stories as well, I hope, as well.
Damon, tell me how the name Jack the Ripper came about.
The first nickname for the killer was actually Leather Apron. And Jack the Ripper actually came about because someone purporting to be the killer wrote a letter to a local news agency, and he wrote it in red ink and said that he actually wanted to do it in the blood of his last victim, but he dried up, but he couldn't, and he signed his name Jack the Ripper, and he said that he was murdering prostitutes and he was going to carry on doing it. And a couple of days later, 2 murders took place on the same night, on the 30th of September, and for public opinion that was it was just sealed, and they wanted a name, and I think it rolled off the tongue and it sounded a little bit more sinister than Leather Apron, which is not a very good name for a serial killer, so it's stuck ever since. So it's been Jack the Ripper, just because of that letter. Mary Kelly was up to 20 years younger than most of the others, most of them in their late 30s, early 40s. She was 24. They'd slipped down into prostitution, some of them from reasonably respectable positions in society, and just lost their way, mostly because of alcoholism.
How many women did he kill before it was over?
Oh, well, there's a question. You will never get one answer to that question. Most people think it was just 5, which I think comes as a surprise to a lot of people because that's not really that many. Others think it was 6, all in a 3-month period in the autumn of 1888. But there are other people who believe that Jack the Ripper, because he was never caught, carried on murdering into 1889 and beyond, and there were countless more victims. It's just they were never attributed to the killer.
If you do the Sinister tours here in London, you're going to come by the place where Jack the Ripper supposedly killed the women in 1888. Behind me is where he supposedly staked his victims out. It's called the 10 Bells, and this is the Whitechapel area of the Sinister tour.
Well, here we are at the Priory Church of St Bartholomew the Great, which is a building that dates back to 1123. It is reputedly one of the most haunted churches in central London. A number of rectors of the church have seen ghosts within the church, sitting amongst the congregation during sermons. But there's also a bit of activity outside in the churchyard, which is just on the left here. But we now today call it a stacked churchyard because they just stacked as many bodies into the ground as they could. And it was the idea of a soul being trapped here on earth that people thought was a ghost. The visual manifestation of a ghost was this trapped soul. Certainly I've come here in the middle of the night, and in the summer it's not unusual to find other people here staking this place out, so good is its reputation. And it is spooky. It's not much darker than this ever. But it is very, very quiet because no one lives around here apart from some nurses in this block on the left here, and they work so hard they sleep like they're dead anyway, so it's silent as the grave. Very spooky, I have to say. But now you know what's underneath the ground, perhaps you'll understand why the trees are doing so well. They're growing rather tall, aren't they?
I'm standing here in London right now in front of the house of Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page lived in the house, the old house that Aleister Crowley lived in before Jimmy Page bought it, and it's supposed to be very haunted. And as everybody knows, Aleister Crowley was considered the most wicked man in the world. We're heading down into the vault of the Hard Rock. This place used to be a bank, and now it's where they keep the old guitars, the Jimi Hendrix guitars, some of the things that we're about to see. Not everyone gets to see. I'm standing here with Jimmy, the vault manager from the Hard Rock Cafe in London. Tell me about this hat that you're holding here.
Okay, sweetheart. Well, this hat is very rare. It's the hat that Bob Dylan wore when he was recording all his sessions for Nashville Skyline. You know, the one he collaborated with all the country artists with. It's a beautiful hat. It's actually a Dobbs New York hat, and he wore it many times. What I like to do, if people come down here, they're big fans of Bob, it's obviously at their own risk. Bob's one of the greatest ever songwriters, but I do, you know, the way Bob speaks, you know, if they wear the hat and start to mumble, I can't be held responsible. But it looks very stylish, and I can just stage that for me. Tell me that it doesn't look like the bee's knees. You may or may not know, but this is the first time that the Hard Rock did a vault because the vault was already in place. This used to be a building which Queen Victoria kept all her gold bullion. It was a royal bank, this very building, and these are the royal vaults that we've now turned into our own little treasure trove, if you will. I will take you in a moment. You can see it wasn't decorated like this when Queen Victoria actually used it as a vault, but we've actually psychedelified it all up to get into the whole spirit of the whole thing. I mean, the thing is, folks, you've got to be careful because I can keep you here talking until you lose the will to live, because I'm a big fan of the music myself. Basically, what we've got here is, it's a little snapshot, if you like, through time of the people who actually broke down the barriers in music, you know, from the old academia, you know, la 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 la. The first music that we really concentrate on here is jazz, and that's where we start our little journey. This is actually Miles Davis's trumpet, the one he used when he did The Bitches Brew, that's a seminal album. He saw Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Pop Festival, and that inspired him to really push the boundaries. And then, of course, the blues came along. Still a very, very valid type of music today because it talks about people's fears and their hopes and their wishes and dreams. And that guitar there we have is actually B.B. King's Lucille guitar. We don't have Elvis with us today. He's probably working somewhere as a truck driver. But we do actually have the karate jacket that he had specially made by his record company for a little demonstration for the Japanese licensees of RCA. Have had that analysed. It says Japan Victor Corporation, and you can see from the logo at the bottom of that they weren't taking any chances in case anybody didn't know who he was represented by. But we do salute Elvis because, apart from anything else, being a great artist and a wonderful human being, he did save us from the authorities' proper version of what they would have us believe was rock and roll, which was Pat Boone. You know, so they've saved us in the horrors and our children's children from the horrors of Pat Boone. Not that Pat Boone's a bad person, but he certainly isn't rock and roll. I mean, tutti frutti, papalooty, it doesn't really cut it, you know. But this is all stuff that belonged to the late great Jimi Hendrix. Now, Jimmy had many different guitars, many Fender guitars who he endorsed, but this is a very exclusive item. Jimmy custom ordered this guitar. It's the only left-hand flying V in the world. Then, of course, it was the 90s. The old school was swept away by the grunge movement, much in the same way as it happened in the 70s with the punk movement. We have Eddie Vedder's guitar from Pearl Jam, and also Kurt Cobain's guitar and Kurt's glasses, and the snow globe from his wedding cake, strangely enough. Both very huge influences to what they would know as the lost generation, you know, young kids that didn't feel they had any voice, and still very great influences today. That goes back to the days of legend when the first two young American chaps opened up the restaurant. They were doing it on a wing and a prayer. You know, they couldn't get any finance from the banks here because they were all very much, no, we didn't win that kind of thing around our place. So you know, it was one of these cases, very organic, like the 70s. They bounced into good luck, you know, because they asked a few people in the record industry if they could put up the founding money. They agreed to that. So, subsequent of that, they told some of their acts. So, in no time at all, the place was buzzing with all the rock stars: the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, Clapton, many, many others. And the memorabilia, actually, incidentally, didn't start off as a prerequisite or a pre-considered idea. What happened was all the guys used to hang out here because it was casual, you know, it was easygoing, mutual respect, if you like. And Eric Clapton came in one night, a little bit, you know, 3 sheets to the wind in those days, bless him, and he took over a little cheap Fender lead guitar. It's like an entry-level guitar, half jokingly as a gesture, and handed it over at the bar across there in Hard Rock, London. And his idea was, look, guys, you know, I'm not here that often, but when I do come, I would like to be able to get a drink. So if I give you this little red guitar, can you possibly put it up and mark my seat? So that when I'm here, oh, that's Eric's seat. How do you know? There's his guitar. And that's how it all began. So they did that after about a week. And then 1 week later, there was a great rivalry in those days. And Pete Townsend from The Who said, oh, I'm as good as he is, you know, hello. And so Pete sent his guitar, a much more expensive guitar, incidentally. It was a Les Paul Custom triple pickup. Yeah, by courier no less, with a little note saying, mine's as good as Eric's, put mine up next to his seat. And the whole thing really snowballed from that.
What do you think of the Beatles?
Shh, no bad. Yes, I've been a big fan of the Beatles for many years, yeah. That's all I can say.
What was your first Beatles song that you ever heard?
I think it was it Can't Buy Me Love? Can't Buy Me Love.
And tell us about this train and what you do on the train.
This train is what you call a class 3 Mark 3 train. It's got an engine at the front and what you call a driving van trailer at the back. It has 9 coaches, weighs about 330 tonnes, and it travels at a maximum speed of 110 miles per hour. It takes about 5 hours from Glasgow to London, 400 miles.
And where do you call home?
Just a wee place outside of Glasgow called Bells Hill. Bells Hill. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Out in the sticks, basically, you know.
I'm only
in the
it's
sticks.
lovely. It's lovely.
It's not bad,
This lady that's holding the mic at me, she's absolutely gorgeous.
and we'll bring you up that wee bit of cake soon. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
This is the cake that I've just brought down for my American friends. I have bought one extra slice down because the lady holding the mic at my mouth is hungry. So I hope you like the cake. Lovely presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Just maybe everything you would.
I'm looking for someone to sing your national anthem. Because
No.
No.
No. Honestly, no.
Is there anybody on the train that can?
I would doubt it very much. You'd probably get Craig to sing it if you asked him. He seems kind of up for anything. So.
Hello. You're around the air. Do you want me to sing?
Yeah.
Oh, here dear, that's
Sing a
Here
man
it.
to-
Hi, hell, the silk sorry. Loch Ness, what, from Glasgow? Half an hour's drive. No, ridiculous. Rubbish, the biggest load of cock and bull, as a Scotsman once said. Have you ever heard the saying, Ockeye the New? Have you ever heard that? Never heard anybody saying, Ockeye the New? That's a Scottish saying. Well, do you know how that came about? Ockeye the New. Do you know how it came about? No, I don't honestly. You know what a GNU is? No. Never heard of GNU? It's what they're like. What do you call it? They're like deer. They're like a deer type of thing, right? They were GNUs, and they lived all over Scotland.
But when they introduced sheep, they decided to get rid of the gnu's. So they started exterminating all the gnu's. So eventually there was a group of gnu's left, and the leader was called Hawkeye. So they chased it till they caught it. Hawkeye the gnu. I'm only winding you up. Don't want to kid you.
I understood about half of that, so I know it was funny because you're laughing. We're standing in front of the Hunterian Art Gallery, which is on the campus of the University of Glasgow. In this museum, they have Charles Rennie Mackintosh, which was associated with the American Frank Lloyd Wright. Charles Rennie Mackintosh lived here in Glasgow, and his house faced south to east. And when they took the house and demolished it, they took the door, which is behind me, and the windows, and they actually brought it here to this museum where they faced it in the exact direction that his house was facing before it was demolished. We're about to speak with Dorothy McKay. She's the marketing and business development manager for the House for an Art Lover.
We had a set of designs that Charles Rennie Mackintosh did way back in 1901 for a German magazine. It was a German design magazine when he was in Germany at the time, exhibiting his work with his wife Margaret MacDonald, who was also an artist, and they saw this competition to design a house for an art lover. Thought it was an ideal competition because they really could be as different and as innovative as they possibly could do at the time. So they came up with the design of the building as you see it today. Although he was late in submitting these designs, so he was actually disqualified from the competition, which was quite a twist in the whole story. However, they did recognise how beautiful the designs were, and they did give him a special monetary prize for it because the designs were just so beautiful. However, these designs, we actually didn't do anything with these designs till the late 1980s. We got some money together and decided to build the house. So the house itself is quite difficult because we didn't actually have Charles Rennie Mackintosh there to consult. And if you talk to anyone who knew Charles Rennie Mackintosh or was involved in any of his other buildings that he actually built, he did change his designs lots. So without his influence, it was a wee bit difficult. However, we had an amazing team of architects, designers and researchers who all got together to build the house. So we were working from a set of about 14 drawings, and you'll see these drawings, copies of these drawings dotted about the house. And also what really makes us quite unique is because the chairs are built to his design, you can actually sit on the chairs. So at the end of the day, because they're not the real thing, but they're also an amazing research project. So you can see these beautiful chairs, you actually see Mackintosh's drawing and how close to the original we kept it. One of the things I should say about the house, there were certain gaps in his drawings, and that he missed out details on, say, the staircase and our oval room, which is another one of the beautiful rooms we have here. So he didn't actually have any details. So we had to look at all the other Mackintosh buildings throughout Glasgow and throughout the area to try and find out, well, what would he have put there? So it's not really guesswork. It's really informed research. When you come into this house, for example, you see very much what Mackintosh's designs were about. You walk into a very dark, wooded, panelled area, very, very high ceiling. You move from a small, lower ceiling vestibule as you come in the front door. We actually come in the back door today, but you can come in the front door, so it's a very low ceiling, into an area with a very high ceiling, and that's Mackintosh was very about contrasts. You very much see a feminine influence in this room, and we would have thought that this room would have been influenced greatly by Margaret MacDonald. Very feminine, as I say, the beautiful embroidered banners on the walls, and the gorgeous details behind the piano and on the piano. This is a Baldacchino piano. It's in working order. We do use it. We have lovely recitals in this room. We have dinner concerts. At the end of the day, Mackintosh's remit was to design a grand house where one could be entertained, and this is hopefully what this house does. The very, very large rooms that can be closed, so we have music in this room. Then people, after the music, can go in next door to the dining room and have dinner. So we can cater for about 110 out there for an evening dinner, which is a really, really nice number. We also can do similar things with weddings. We have weddings in this room, which you can imagine is absolutely beautiful. The windows actually open onto the balcony, and you can look out onto the gorgeous gardens, which are very, very nice.
On our way up the road this morning, we had to stop because we saw the Highland cows, which here in Glasgow they call the Highland coos. So behind me, the Highland cows are having an enjoyable morning with sun and eating, and it's very nice here today, and we expect it to be quite warm for a February morning and afternoon. I'm standing here in the temporary exhibit for the art treasures of Kelvin Grove. Kelvin Grove is actually an art museum here in Glasgow, and it's closed right now under renovation. Behind me you can see that there's a bit of an empty wall. This is where we thought Botticelli would be. We came here looking for Botticelli, one of my favorite artists, and they said that there was something wrong with the wall, and so they had to take the Botticellis down as well as a couple of other paintings. But if you come to the grand opening or the reopening, then you will get to see Botticelli among many other Italian artists. While many people visit museums every day, unless you're a real art lover, you may not always recognize the names that you see on the walls. Well, behind me is A Man in Armor, which was from 1655, and it's from a name of a painter that we definitely recognize, Rembrandt. We're making our way around Scotland today, visiting museums and taking in a bit of culture. Right now we're at the Burrell Collection in Glasgow, where I'm standing next to the famous bronze statue, The Thinker. I'm standing right now next to the Age of Bronze. The Burrell Collection was a collection that was collected by Charles Burrell. He has about 9,000 objects that he left to the city of Glasgow, and they've turned it into a museum. I'm standing here in the Hutton Room, and this collection has actually been owned by the city of Glasgow since 1944. However, this museum did not open until 1983. One of the reasons they decided to open this museum was to bring some culture to the city of Glasgow. After the shipbuilding industry here in Glasgow became more or less non-existent, the city kind of went into a slump and they didn't have anything to do with it. So they decided to start a slogan called Glasgow's Miles Better. Now that wasn't really for the tourists, that was for the locals, because they needed to find some civic pride in order to generate the sort of feeling that they would need in order to have tourists come to the city. One thing to remember is that in 1990, Glasgow was actually named the European City of Culture for that year. And now, as you can see, they've done quite a wonderful job of bringing tourists in and adding culture to the city.